question. Yeah. All right. Cool. Just want to make sure, and then everyone can see my screen as well. Correct? You see the presentation? All right, cool. I always like to double check. Technology is not always the biggest fan of me, so that's okay. No big deal. Well, it is a honor and pleasure to meet you all. My name is Ethan Wright. I am one of our senior admissions counselors here at IU Indianapolis. I usually oversee the recruitment of all of Northeast Indiana, so South Bend, Elkhart, St. Joe area is kind of what I do. I'm also our specialized recruiter in rural recruitment, so rural students as well as LGBTQ plus students. Definitely very unique, definitely something that I do appreciate and I do enjoy. I've been in my position now for about 3 years. I graduated from IU PUI, but IU Indianapolis. So I get used for a lot of presentations to help figure out how things are going to go from a professional and student perspective. So 10 common questions that we kind of see ourselves always is kind of what the presentation is going to go over today. But before I start, I'm just going to do like a really quick shameless plug for us, obviously. As many of you may know, or many of you who may not know, we are no longer IUPUI. We are now IU Indianapolis. This is something that is a little bit different from us. It's a completely different thing that has been going on. Really, kind of to sum everything up, just to help clear out any confusion, why we went through our little transition is that Purdue does things really well, IU does things really well, and we wanted to assure that both universities are able to assist students to the best of the ability. So being able to go through that transition of Purdue taking over all the engineering concepts and then IU taking over the rest of the medical, life sciences, computer science, so forth and so on, was kind of what we were shooting for. So I just kind of wanted to let you guys know that's really what is going on with that one, if you weren't aware or you weren't sure. So basically, at the end of the day, we'll be like a heavy research, STEM, health and life science campus, and that's where a lot of students are definitely looking for in certain areas. So just kind of throw that out there. As we're going on, and there's a lot of questions that we get from students continuously. I don't think if I wasn't asked a question every day, I wouldn't be doing my job correct at this point. Definitely something that's kind of going on is something that we're interacted in. So they've just, students will come to you. I've decided my dream school. What's going to be the first thing that I should do? And the first thing that we always mention to students is the fact that you should probably let the school know as soon as possible if you are going to be attending us. And I'll kind of get into that portion of it a little bit later. The second thing is obviously setting up your computing account. Most universities, if not all, have a separate computing area. I do see it very common that some students will mistake their guest account that they created to apply to us as their account that they will be using. Obviously not the case. You completely redo your account. You make a full one. It's functional. It's operational. It's kind of your lifeline to everywhere on our campus. It gives you access to your college email, gives you access to the Bursar account, gives you access to scholarship portals. It gives you access to housing, orientation, so forth, so on. So having your computing account is really the biggest thing that we want to make sure students have the moment that they are admitted into any type of university. Makes it easy, makes it simple, all that good stuff. The planning to attend part can come a little bit later on. That is something that we do tell students. If you for sure know you want to come here and you're kind of set on that after you've been admitted, great, cool. But students have a lot of options nowadays. They have a lot of different choices. I see students applying to 10, 15, 20 different colleges, and I'm like, that's a lot to keep track of. And I applaud them. I only applied to 3 different universities myself because I said, I know exactly where I want to go, all that good stuff. So one of the other pieces of advice that kind of link to this is the things that they should do first. And this is a piece of advice that I tell all my students. You guys are more than welcome to take it or modify it to yourself. Since there are so many choices and options, there's a lot going on, there's a lot to do. I always highly encourage my students to pick their top 3 to 4 different universities and do the next steps as if you were for sure going to come to us. Why I say this is that a lot of students lose out on potential for scholarship, for extra money, for housing, orientation, getting good class spots, because they're a little bit behind the track because they're trying to keep track of all these different majors. They're trying to keep track of all their admissions requirements. They're trying to keep track of where they've been accepted, where they've been waitlisted, so forth and so on. It becomes a lot, and it's a lot to keep track of sometimes. So I highly encourage students to make sure that they at least pick their top 3 or 4 and do everything as if you were going to come to us, because we all have similar deadlines and dates, but we do have very different deadlines and dates as well. From there, I've taken dual credit. IB or AP classes? Where do I get those credits for classes? What about the Indiana Common College Core? Definitely another big question that we get asked quite frequently. Most schools will accept a majority of your credits regardless. Now, each school has a different requirement. Obviously, for us specifically, it's a level 100 course with a C or better. We will take it. We will not ask questions. Anything lower than a level 100 course and or lower than a C, we will not be able to accept it. We will not be able to award that credit. So it's definitely important for students to make sure that they're doing really well in those dual credit classes if they don't want to have to retake the course here. AP scores work a little bit differently. 3, 4, and 5 are the most common ones that we look after ourselves. And then depending on what score they get is depending on will it fill in as an elective. Or if it will fill in as a actual face value class here at IU Indianapolis. But once again, this kind of differs between universities. This is just how we kind of do that. So that's when we kind of have to tell students they have to do a little bit of their own homework just to kind of double check, look through things, get an idea of what could potentially transfer, what won't transfer. It's just kind of a normal basis there. I do know for our university, it does usually take 4 to 6 weeks to do like a credit evaluation. So if students want to, we do need an official college transcript sent to us, obviously, in order to award any of that credit or get an idea of what it is. But students are more than welcome to send like an official transcript now if they have anything. So that way we can do that evaluation and we can let them know for sure this is going to be this is going to be this. Another thing that I always want to remind students is, especially in the IU system, and this works for other systems as well, if you're taking a dual credit through that system, you already have an account created. So then that becomes another thing back to the account concept of once you already have the account created, we use it for everything. Sometimes they might have to go find their account and they're going to have to contact the university for that. But if they've taken the dual credit through that specific university, usually we don't need an official like an official transcript. We can just pull it from the system in itself. And that works for most universities as well. If I'm going too fast, you guys can wave me down and be like, yo, this is not working. I talk fast. I talk with my hands a lot, so I apologize in advance. So obviously paying for college, that is our next big thing. This is the one thing that we get asked about constantly is how am I going to pay for college? What is the pricing? How much is it going to cost me? So forth and so on. So obviously we break it down into federal scholarships and state to kind of help alleviate any confusion and make sure that they have a little bit more in-depth detail. You're looking at the direct loans, you're looking at work studies, so forth and so on. Items that help students obviously pay for college and college going concepts, which is really important. Talking to students about work study usually does get a little bit in the weeds because they're not really sure what it fully means. I won't go into too much depth or detail about that because I'm sure they will mention it later on in the FAFSA presentation, but definitely make sure that you are well aware of what a work study is and be able to explain that to them because it kind of goes over their head sometimes. It goes over my head sometimes too. Let's be honest. Some of the terms and words that we use, crazy. So definitely enjoy that, and I think it's very important to have that. Scholarship wise, the importance of internal versus external scholarships, that is a really big thing as well. Most universities do have their own scholarship portals that students are able to apply through. The one thing that I like about ours specifically is that it's kind of like an automated system. Students are able to fill out the general application for us. From that scholarship application, our system then auto sorts, reads through, AIs everything, and pulls the scholarships forward that they will be able to apply to specifically. We have a recommended tab, we have an all tab, kind of ask other universities how their systems may work. This is just something that I really enjoy about ours is the fact that it's easy. You've already done that general application, don't got to worry about it. Everything pops up right there. You apply for whatever you want, makes it really nice, really easy. External wise, these become a little bit more difficult to kind of find because you never know what's for sure going to be a proper external scholarship and what may not. That does involve a little bit of research as well. One of the things that I've done, and this is something that is really important to kind of ask maybe admission counselors if they do have like a scholarship spreadsheet. So I personally have just like a quick little spreadsheet that I show students if they have trouble or if they're wondering where they can go for scholarships. I have it organized by our school specific scholarships, external, if you're a first gen student, if you're a 21st century scholar type student, so forth and so on. There's a lot of different scholarships for a lot of different things. And I think it's important because students now have a hard time figuring out what they do need and what they don't need. So a little bit of help and a little bit of handholding can go a long way at that point. The one thing that I always shamelessly plug to all my students is this external scholarship wise. A lot of them, obviously, as you guys may know, carrying the county-based scholarships are a big thing to consider. I mean, if we're looking at the state of Indiana in itself, every county in the state of Indiana has their own scholarship database in which students can apply to pull from, which is really beneficial because that's a lot of money just right there that students are usually aware of or they're not really thinking about. So that's something to kind of get out there. And then lastly, obviously, the difference between a renewable scholarship versus a first year scholarship. I remember getting a good amount my first year when I went for college, and then the renewable ones is what kind of saved me the rest of my college. I always like to be a good example for my students in the fact of when we are talking about scholarships. As someone who's attended this university myself, I am a double major with a minor and a triple certification. I have no undergraduate debt. I didn't pay a dime to go to this university that I'm at working now, just because of scholarships. That wasn't my FAFSA money. That wasn't my Pell Grant, my O'Bannon. It was just my scholarship money. So I like to assure students that there's a high possibility that you can actually do that. Like it's not something that is fake. It's not something that isn't a real expectation or goal. It's just the work that you're going to have to put into that is going to be a little bit extra, and you're going to have to really look through and think about some stuff. So definitely really helpful when you look at that. State funds, obviously 21st century scholars. Every university is different. For us specifically, covers all of tuition and mandatory fees, makes it a little bit easier on students. So then that way they really just have to focus on like that housing, books, transportation concept, and then the O'Bannon grant, which I'm sure they will also get into later regarding the financial aid presentation. From there, we kind of go into the concept of orientation, and this is where students do get a little bit more confused. This is where the difference between an admissions counselor and an academic advisor really does start to kind of blend together for situations. So this is something that is very important. When we're looking at orientation specifically, this is where we have them actually physically schedule their courses and classes. So whether that be scheduling your classes, your meeting with your advisor, the evaluations for any dual credit have been done, have been established. The advisors are able to go in and correctly make sure that they're taking the correct courses, classes, things along those lines that are going to be helpful to them. Obviously, we're not going to want to make you take a class if you already have the credit for it and you've already done it. That's completely redundant. So we're not going to have to do that. From there, you also learn more about the campus. Some universities will do like an overnight experience. Some will just do a whole day experience. It really is just dependent on how the university wants to go about it. I know when I first came back in 2017, it was a overnight experience, which I highly enjoyed. Nowadays, we just do a simple 1 day, whole day event, and that way, that is all the information that they need. We learn about campus. You learn how to be the mascot, Jaguars, the Trident, so forth, so on. You start learning about where to go, classes, where's the best places to eat maybe on campus. A lot of students might have preferences, which is very interesting. They meet their peer mentors and they kind of get to go through that process. In addition to that, obviously the support offices, that is a really big thing. And that is one thing that we've definitely seen with yielding concepts or helping students feel like they belong on a campus is our support services that we have. Obviously, when we're looking at support services, I'm talking about any tutoring services that might be on campus, any multicultural or LGBTQ plus centers. That's a really big thing that we have here. Do we have resources to accommodate those students? What are kind of clubs, organizations that they can be part of? Diversity-based programming, athletics, sports, clubs, organizations. These are also still classified as support offices because they help students kind of get engaged and that assists in their mental health a little bit. That's another big thing. Do you have mental health resources on campuses? Type of situations, just think along those lines. This is really important because a lot of students, they come to orientation, they decide they want to go to us, they see all these support offices. That's also a question in itself is when they're first looking at universities, what are these support offices or supports that we are able to give your students so that way, one, they feel like they belong, and two, they will be able to succeed very well. So that's something that I would definitely recommend, have your students think about as they're kind of going through processes. Meeting your future classmates, making friends, being able to communicate with everybody, that's really important. My best friend to this day is one of my classmates that I met first day orientation. It was wonderful. Her and I clicked instantly. We got along very quickly, and we are still friends to this day. She might have moved. I'm still here. We talk every day. It does not matter. And we've been friends now for 7+ years. So it's definitely important that these students are looking at orientation and being able to go to this and be able to do that. Informational sessions for parents and students, whether that be, admitted type student days, junior day events, daily campus tours, so forth, so on. These are things that are really important. as well, in addition to the orientation, but they go back through orientation through this specifically. We actually separate the students and the parents at one point, so that way students can be students, they can enjoy themselves, they can kind of be themselves, they don't have to worry about a parental figure like watching over them, because we all know the common helicopter parents, or nowadays we call them lawnmower parents, type situations. And then now we also have parents being able to get the information that they need specifically to learn how to support their child as they're going through this entire college going process. I think this is really beneficial, especially to first generation students, because I remember my mom looking at me being like, I have no clue what I'm going to do to help you, because I was a first gen student. No one else in my family had ever went to college. So the parental sessions that she went to really made her feel like she could understand how to finally help me as I went through my college going process. So it's really important that you have that. And then obviously getting your student ID, so that way you can go to campus, you can get your food, you can access your dorms, just fun little things like that. What is an enrollment deposit? What does it mean when you pay it? Are there deposits for housing? This is another big question that we usually get. So obviously, the enrollment deposit is notifying us that you are for sure committing to us as a university. We have a $100 enrollment deposit that we have students put down. The one thing that I think a lot of students do panic a little bit is that if I do decide to come and I don't want to come afterwards, then I've lost money. For us specifically, every university is different. For us, it's just money that kind of goes back into your Bursar account at the end of the day. So that's kind of how that one works. I highly usually encourage students, if they can get a fee waiver, that is very important. Usually fee waivers, you can waive the enrollment deposit. Especially this year, we're doing that for a lot of our students because of FAFSA. We all know how that's currently going. So do apologize on that one. But that's just basically your placeholder. That is basically telling us that you want to come to us, you're committed to us, you are ready to do orientation, you're ready to schedule classes and courses, and you're ready to come to us in the fall when the semester starts, or maybe in the spring if they've decided to start a spring term as well. So what does it mean when you pay it? Obviously, like I said, committing. And are there deposits for housing? Yes. For us specifically, our deposits range. There's a $50 fee for the application, and then it's $150 to fully accept your contract to live on our campus and housing. This helps give us an accurate number of students that are attending, but it also gives us an accurate number of how many students we are housing. And we kind of just go from there, which is really beneficial for us, but it's also beneficial for other individuals, because if they happen to have to be waitlisted, that then helps us give us, other options of like, yeah, you want to come here, but maybe you got waitlisted, you can't get into housing on campus. Here's some other suggestions of like apartments that are close to our campus that we see a lot of students reside in, that might be beneficial to you to be able to stay, so that way you can still come here if you want to. Or if students are close enough, maybe commuting from home type situations, things along those lines. Living on campus. This is a really big situation that we get asked a lot frequently, especially since we're part of the IU system. Bloomington usually requires students to live on campus the first year. Here at IU Indianapolis, we do not require students to live on campus at any point in time. Another big thing, students can have their car on campus. If you live on campus, you can have your car your first year as well. That's always a big thing that we're kind of looking into. Types of housing, is it first year only housing? Is there co-ed housing? Excuse me, by floor or wings, communal showers versus in-room, private bathroom type situations. That's a very common one that we get asked a lot. The ability to get a one bedroom, that seems to be a very frequently asked question right now, if I can get a one bedroom on your campus. So definitely something to kind of think about as well. Traditional regular apartments, when you think of in the movies, that's what you got going, versus like an apartment on campus style living housing. Obviously, for me specifically, a lot of the students that I deal with and recruit with, is it LGBTQ plus friendly housing? Will I be able to be myself in my area? Will there be any complications that I have to worry about? We do have what we call RBLCs, obviously, so residence-based learning communities. These are areas where students are able to live in when they have like-minded fields or interests. So we have like a whole floor that is for like our STEM, for our medical-based students, health and life sciences. We have a whole whole floor called Unity Hall for LGBTQ plus identifying students. We have diversity based ones as well. Just kind of those situations and those little things that once again make you feel supported and make you feel at home while you're on campus, because that's a really big part of the campus going process is, will I feel like I belong on this campus? And then obviously reading the fine print on meal plans. We do have a variety of meal plans and most universities do as well. Just really depends on what students want to do, how they want to go about it, and that system that they're going to be going through as they kind of go through their process here on campus. A lot of students, obviously, if they live on campus, a meal plan is required if you live in our housing. So that is something to be aware of as well. But there are there are other meal plans that if you aren't living on our campus and you do want to have a meal plan, you're able to obtain one if that's going to help you obviously eat and make sure you're taking care of yourself on the daily. Excuse me. So I've been admitted, but I decided to change my major. What should I do? It's definitely probably one of the next biggest common questions I get next to the enrollment deposit is, I've decided that I want to change my major. How do I go through this process? That is the situation. Once you're already admitted into our system, we usually suggest students be very careful of like whether you're updating your application or kind of what's going on. If it's farther, like lesser in the school year, not closer to orientation, our orientation sign up is in March. It occurs in June and July. If you're still looking at like August, September, October type realm, doing an update form for us specifically is the easiest way to do that. Most students are able to contact our office. We can update it. We do have an update form online that we will direct students to as well. They fill out some information, they pick the right major that they want, and then it updates in our system and it updates the application in total. That being said, if we are closer to that orientation deadline and date, so like the March, April, May type situation, we highly recommend our students change your major at orientation or when you go to sign up for orientation. This is the easiest way for them to easily kind of like process through the system very nicely, very smoothly. There's no having the application come out of our system to then go back into our system, because that's what the update form does for us specifically, is that it kicks the student out, changes the major, and then kicks the student back in, which it can occur some problems if it does happen that way. So if the student is closer to orientation timeline, just do the changing of the major at orientation and or when they sign up for orientation. That way they don't have to worry about the account going weird. They don't have to worry about anything being a mess. Everything just stays the same and we just change it right then and there, which is kind of nice and very convenient. We also recommend students don't try to do housing applications or orientation sign up on their phones. I know in the world that we live in today, phones are the easiest way for everybody to communicate and do stuff. Everyone has most people have iPhones, so forth, Android smartphones. Our applications, for whatever reason, do not like them. So definitely encourage the students to be using like a laptop or something along those lines, so that way nothing goes haywire there either. Just makes it easier for everybody. So are there any summer experiences I can take part in? This year, we are doing a lot of different summer experiences for our schools, which is really exciting. So a lot of our schools offer students a chance to come on campus the week before classes start to move in and get acclimated. We call this our Bridge Week. So students are able to move in early, start forming those connections, start forming those bonds, figure out where your classrooms are, and kind of start your first year seminar. First year seminar is also something that is required out of all first year students, especially on our campus. I really loved my first year seminar. It taught me a lot. This is a area or class that most students will have to take to help them acclimate not only from the transition to high school into college, but if they're deciding to look into doing like different majors, it's something that they didn't realize. I'll be very honest with you all. I came in originally as a pre-nursing student. My first year seminar, we had a lot of other people that were in the medical realm come to our class and talk about other majors in the medical sense if we did not want to be a nurse. Quickly did I realize nursing wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. I quickly changed into music therapy and psychology, and I have never regretted my decision afterwards. So the first year seminar is really important, and being able to move in that first week is really important for students to kind of get that going, and it helps them kind of acclimate a little bit better. There are even some schools that go further and offer chances for students to take an intensive class with a professor. This is definitely something that is very unique to us that I am aware of. It's very hands-on, very interactive. You kind of work with the professor kind of on a one-on-one basis. We also do have a lot of research opportunities. We are one of the larger urban research facilities At IU Indianapolis, we do have programs where first year students can actually get paired with professors and conduct in research and help the professor with that type of research, which is very nice, very hands on, very interactive. It gets students really excited to be able to do something really neat with someone that they have a similar interest in, which is kind of nice. And then prior to senior year, are there programs or camps for students? And some, even involve scholarships. Our Lilly School specifically does computer like boot camps type situations where they can get a certification, they get prior course credit, and it is linked to a specific scholarship that the student can get if they do attend the camp the whole time. So that's something that can help with that financial part that we talked about earlier. Another thing, this is probably one of my closer to the last slides, is how to develop a supporting network. Academic wise, obviously, you're looking at academic tutors, you're looking at office hours, you're looking at study groups. We do have our own tutoring services that are available on our campus for our students to access and use at any point in time, which is really beneficial. We do have our own math assistance center, we have a writer's lab, so forth, so on. So much that we know students need so much help that we have two of each on our campus. So that's kind of a neat little thing. Those office hours, all of our professors are required to have office hours. This allows you to go in, ask questions. If there is something that you do not feel comfortable raising your hand and asking in front of like 120 people, you don't have to do that. Don't panic, don't worry. Anxiety is a real hard time, and I get that. But being able to go talk to your professor one on one and get that like whole concept that you need and get the right answer that you need to learn and better suit you is something that's really important. A lot of professors, once you do start to form those connections as well, really help you as you go through the process. A lot of my internships that I obtained when I was in college was because of my professors, which was really convenient. I interned at like Riley Children's Hospital, I interned at the Veteran Affairs Hospital, and I interned at the Simon Cancer Center when I was in college, all because my professors were able to get me into those places and said, "Hey, I have a student that would be really good with this. You should look into them," which was really beneficial. Psychologically, do you have on-campus counseling? Are there group sessions, awareness weeks, fun little things and activities that help students kind of relax? We do have therapy dogs that come on during finals week. Also, before finals week, we kind of have like a decompression type area, sensory area for students to kind of just feel relaxed, all that good stuff. And then lastly, other things that we definitely want students to look into is like getting involved. That's really important. I always tell students that you make college what you want to make it. So obviously, if you aren't thinking about getting involved and you kind of just stay in your dorm room, you're not talking with people, you're only focusing on your studies, that's just how it's going to be. If you want to go out and get involved and make friends and kind of do things, you're going to have to do it yourself. I mean, here we have over 500 clubs and organizations. We have fraternity, sorority life. Students do get involved pretty quickly and they really do enjoy it. Or maybe there's traditions that we have that students would like to, really look into. My favorite is the Jagathon. It's the Riley Dance Marathon. You raise money for Riley Children's Hospital. That being said, it is a whole dance marathon that lasts 13 to 16 hours of just straight dancing. You might be a little sore, but it's fine. No big deal. And then the added benefit, since we are really close to Riley Children's Hospital, is that the kids actually get to come over and partake in the festivities as well. So that's probably one of our biggest traditions on our campus, making sure that they are aware of other campuses' traditions. Office of Veteran Affairs, if you do have any students that might go that pathway, some students will start going to the military and then come out and go back to school. Accessible Education Services, we call this AES because we love acronyms at IUI, if you weren't aware. So this is where students who have any type of learning disabilities, physical handicaps, mental handicaps, so forth and so on, that might impede at any point in time or kind of like panic them in any sense. This is where our office kind of comes in and that kicks in. The AES office is able to make sure that the proper accommodations that they probably have gotten in high school are able to be replicated here for our students, whether that be extra time on test, extra time on homework, someone broke their arm, they need someone to help take notes, stuff along those lines, and it makes it a little bit easier. And then obviously student advocates, there's something that I learned very quickly is that you do have to advocate for yourself a lot. Mommy and daddy aren't going to help you with that too much. So knowing how to advocate for yourself, knowing where to go to advocate for yourself, and knowing your rightful dues on how to do things. That's really a big thing that I think a lot of students need to figure out and they need to learn. And this is a process because as you kind of get on older in your life, you have to advocate for yourself all the time. That's just how that works. So being able to have those resources for students to use, but then also helping teach them how to advocate for themselves at the end of the day. Now it's just time for people to ask me questions. I only know so much as what I know. These are just my personal opinions. These are things that we see quite frequently. If there's questions that you guys get that maybe we don't get, I would love to answer anything. I also did want to mention that to meet your counselors for your guys' area, I know this is encompassing more of Marion County. That is not usually my area of where I recruit. That is more up to Brittany Menora. She's our senior admissions counselor for multicultural recruitment. She is the Marion County specific recruiter. And then Alyssa Luna, she is our senior assistant director of recruitment and counseling. She deals with all the interpublic schools. She is that counselor specifically for that, and she oversees those programs. So just want to make sure you guys are aware of who you need to go to. I would love to help with any questions, comments, and concerns, but they are probably going to be the masters of this area specifically, just because it's not somewhere that I normally recruit in. So, but what can I help answer for you guys now?
As
I,
everybody's thinking of their questions, Ethan, can you talk? I know you can only specifically talk about yours, but has your May 1 date moved, right? Like the ideal time frame of when a student can tell a school that they're actually coming to their school. Has that moved for all of you or anything like that?
Yeah, so we've kind of moved everything back a little bit. So June 1st is kind of what we're looking for. That is something that we have realized that students need a little bit more time, especially with how the FAFSA is working right now. This is allowing students to have a better idea of like, okay, I have more time. I don't have to panic as much because we understand that May 1st is quickly approaching. And especially in the admissions world, it seems like we never slow down, especially in higher education or in education in general. So June 1st is kind of going to be our deadline on stuff like that. Now, I know I saw a question in the chat of who's the St. Joe count, who's the rep for St. Joe. I am actually the rep for St. Joe, so that's where I recruit specifically. So I am the St. Joe Elkhart. Anything in Northeast Indiana, bread and butter, that's me. I'm from that area. They use me to recruit from that area. That's just kind of how that one works.
We're very lucky to have Ethan presenting for us today, but also Brittany was originally going to be joining us. So all of you Marion County folks, right, who probably talk with Brittany a lot or email with Brittany a lot about those students, she had a family emergency. So she just was not be able to attend with us, but Ethan gladly stepped in, obviously. And he's more than happy to help on any occasion as well, too.
Perfect. I also did drop my email because it was requested if people want my contact information. If there's something that I said or you guys want more information just for me specifically, since you guys dealt with me a lot today, more than welcome to reach out. Be more than happy to help you at any point in time. I'm pretty much available very quickly and I try to answer very quickly as well.
Phenomenal. All right. Looks like we don't have any questions for Ethan. I know questions tend to come later as well too, so you all feel free to reach out. Obviously, I come from an admissions background, so I'm going to continue to echo what Ethan said. Please reach out to your admissions offices and your representatives for these amazing schools across the state. We know that this year is crazy, right? Like there's been rocky rollouts, there's been delays, there's been new legislation, there's been everything that's been happening. So schools are aware of all of that, right? Colleges, universities are aware. We're aware of everything that's happening as well too. So especially your students and families who are really concerned or really struggling or not sure what a next step should be or anything like that. Speaking as somebody who also comes from the admissions world, like please reach out to your admissions counselors, assistant directors, directors, all of your friends that you've made as they've come into your school buildings this year as well too. And we're all happy to support and help as well. Ethan, thank you again. Ethan may stick around for a little bit or he may hop off because it's a busy time of year for Ethan as well too in admissions offices. But Ethan, thank you so much. We also have Colby and Lauren here, respectively from Ivy Tech and Indiana University, Indianapolis as well. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them to share their screens. I think Lauren's going to be driving potentially. Perfect. And we'll get going on probably a very exciting thing for everybody to hear is financial aid notifications and how to decode all of those and how we help our families do that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Hillary. And kudos to you, Ethan. That was a great job. I'm glad hopped on and was able to catch that because you had a lot of good information. So thanks so much for that. And you teed us up quite nicely because you mentioned a number of financial aid pieces, right? Financial aid notifications, state aid, you know, what the heck all of our financial aid terminology means, all of that good stuff. So hopefully we help with a bit of that. So to start, I am Lauren Greiter. I'm the Executive Director of Student Financial Services at Indiana University, Indianapolis, and joined by Colby Shank from Ivy Tech. And I don't know if you want to give a brief intro, Colby, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, I'm Colby Shank. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Student Financial Aid here at Ivy Tech, and I've been in this role for going on 4 years. And prior to that, I actually worked at the Commission for Higher Education, where I worked with our state financial aid program. So very excited to come back and support the Commission with this very timely topic, and happy to be here.
All right. So we've got a bit of information to share with you all today. I hope our goals, and I hope we meet them, is during our time to just kind of, like I said, Ethan teed it up so nicely for us. There's a lot of terminology, a lot of acronyms in higher ed, but certainly in financial aid. So kind of laying some foundational framework for key financial aid terminology that you will hear, that students will see in financial aid notifications and communications from their respective schools. And then also thinking about some key questions that students and families may want to consider and ask themselves and have conversations about when comparing financial aid notifications from 1, 2, 3, a variety of schools. What are those key components that they should be considering as they look at those offers? And then, of course, it wouldn't be April 2024 if we didn't address the elephant in the room and some key considerations very specific to the upcoming 24-25 school year. So that's our hope to do that. And then we'll also open it up, of course, for questions at the end. So I will pass it over to you, Colby, to talk through some of our key terminology.
Well, and there is, as Lauren said, there is a lot of financial aid specific terminology. So we're hoping to point out some of the key elements that will help you as you're working with students to decipher the financial aid offers that are sent to students. And we recognize that you may not retain all of this today, but fortunately you do have this wonderful resource to be able to refer back to. Lauren and I also will make sure we share our information in the chat as well, so that if you have any additional follow-up questions, especially this year, as it's a very fluid year, lots of changes have occurred, and we all are sort of adapting to our environment this year. But please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to assist. But I want to start us off with cost of attendance, or also known as COA. This is, I think, one of the most important critical concepts in financial aid. It's often referred to as the student's budget for financial aid. It's kind of that top level number that allows financial aid administrators to provide students with financial aid up to that cost of attendance. It is the estimated total cost of attending an institution for one academic year. And this amount includes a couple of things. And I think it's important to note, this isn't just items that are being paid to the institution. So this is looking at costs that are, as we'll touch on later, direct, paid to the institution, as well as costs that are estimates of what the student may experience, but results can vary, they are estimates. So cost of attendance includes tuition and fees, books and supplies, housing, food, transportation, and miscellaneous costs. All right, next slide. All right, another very timely terminology, and one that is new for 24-25, and that is the Student Aid Index. So I think many of you, if you've worked in this space before and helped students file FAFSA in prior years, you're very familiar with expected family contribution, or EFC. Well, EFC as of 24-25 is no more, and we are now using what's called a Student Aid Index, or SAI. That is the new EFC. Now, there are some changes that kind of are happening under the hood of the formula that's used to calculate SAI, but generally speaking, SAI is the new EFC. And SAI is an eligibility index number that a college financial aid office uses to determine how much federal student aid the student would receive if the student attended the school. The number results from the information that the student provides on their FAFSA. It's important to note that while this is a number that we definitely use for determining federal student aid, it's also very critical for determining many state financial aid programs, as well as many institutional financial aid programs. So very, very important number. All right, next slide. Unmet need, also known as remaining need. This is the student's cost of attendance minus their student aid index minus any need-based aid received, such as gift aid, federal work study, or federal direct subsidized loans. This is used when determining eligibility for other forms of need-based financial aid. All right, next slide. Gift aid. There's a lot of things that encompass gift aid, so you have kind of a long definition here. But gift aid are funds awarded to the student that do not have to be repaid, with an asterisk here. Generally, they do not have to be repaid unless the student fails to meet certain criteria, such as a service requirement that is specified as a condition of the gift aid, or not completing the period for which the aid was awarded. I think one of the more common forms of gift aid, certainly by the numbers and the dollar amount, is the federal Pell Grant. And while the federal Pell Grant is gift aid, there are scenarios where that money does have to be returned if the student withdraws from the institution. So important caveat there. But gift aid can include awards of titles such as grants, scholarships, remissions, awards, waivers. Gift aid can be awarded based on many factors, including financial need, academic excellence, athletic, musical, or theatrical talent, affiliation of various groups, or career aspirations. So generally, this is what we would refer to as free money for the student, but there are scenarios where it may need to be returned. All right, next slide. So there's a lot of different types of gift aid. I want to touch on just a couple of the more commonly used terms. A grant is gift aid that is typically based on financial need. A great example of that is our federal Pell Grant, but also the state Franco-Bannon Grant. Those are two types of gift aid that are based on financial need. And so that grant nomenclature is a good example of it in use. And then scholarships. Scholarships are generally gift aid that is typically based on merit, such as academic excellence, talent, affiliation of various groups, or career aspirations, or, and this is important, a combination of merit and need. Great example at the state level is our 21st Century Scholars Program, because that is a program that is based on financial need, but it also takes into consideration many other factors too, including making certain that the students are graduating with certain GPAs in high school, as well as certain diploma types as well, and completing that Scholar Success Program. All right, next slide, please. All right, as I mentioned, cost of attendance is kind of an estimate of indirect cost as well as those costs that are being paid directly to the institution. So it is important to kind of break out those two components. So direct costs are charges in that cost of attendance that the student or family pays directly to the college. So think tuition, think fees that you would pay to IU Indianapolis or to Ivy Tech Community College directly. Whereas indirect costs are going to be those estimates that are included in the cost of attendance that aren't necessarily paid directly to the institution. So a good example of that would be at Ivy Tech. We do not have any on-campus housing, but in our cost of attendance, we do include a reasonable estimate for housing and food that a student may experience while they're enrolled as a student at our institution. It's not being paid to Ivy Tech, but it is still something that's being factored into the total educational costs that the student might incur if they enroll at our institution. And then you're doing some subtraction here. Net price is the next term I want to cover, and that is the amount of direct and indirect costs remaining after all gift aid is applied. Net price can be covered through a variety of sources, including savings, income, and education loans. And this is important because net price is not necessarily what the student is going to owe to the institution. It is a part of this formula that is outlined here that's taking into account both those direct costs that are owed to the institution, as well as indirect costs that are estimates that the student would not have to pay to the college. All right, next slide. All right, education loans. This is a form of financial aid that must be repaid. Educational loans have varying fees, interest rates, repayment terms, or borrower protections. And there's a lot of different types of loans. So the federal government, of course, is a big provider of educational loans in the higher education space. There are a number of different types of federal loans, including subsidized loans, which the federal government essentially pays the interest while the student is in school, as well as unsubsidized loans where that is not the case. There are also federal direct parent plus loans that parents can take out for their children to help pay for some of these educational costs as well. And then outside of federal loans, there are many forms of private educational loans that can also be incurred by students and are available to students to help meet some gaps. So lots of different lenders, lots of different ways that those look, but that is another potential funding option for students. All right, and I believe I have one more terminology I wanted to touch on, and that is federal work study. So you might see this offer on students' financial aid offers, and so it is important to know what this means, what this program does, and what might be needed still for the student to be able to actually receive this money. So federal work study is a program offered by our federal government that is administered by the institution that provides an opportunity for part-time employment to students with financial need to help pay their educational expenses. So a couple of things to keep in mind here is that students are still responsible for finding qualified employment. So just because a student is offered federal work study doesn't mean it's guaranteed yet. The student still has to find an eligible position, potentially on campus. There are also off-campus work study positions as well, but they do have to be hired into that role. And the other thing to keep in mind is that these funds are earned by the student as they're working this part-time job. And so the funds will be paid out typically through a paycheck as the student is earning it, as the student is working those hours. So federal work study is paid part-time employment that's included in the student's financial aid package. All right, Lauren, I think this is I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, we will now get into, now that we've had that nice framework, thank you, Colby, kind of laid for us in terms of the key terminology. Those essentially become our building blocks, right? What we need to have a firm understanding at each of our institutions, what each of those options look like for our students, building out what a student's cost of attendance will look like. All of those have to be in place before we can award students and send them their financial aid notifications. So real quick, if I could, from all of the attendees, if you could just drop a yes in the chat, if you have students who will come to you with a financial aid notification in hand, they may be excited, they may have questions about it, but is that something that you typically see that they are sharing with you, perhaps bringing their financial aid notification and sharing that? Just drop a yes in the chat if so. And if not, and maybe you just talk about it, drop a no. So for those of you who see financial aid notifications, This will not be news to you, and those of you who haven't, perhaps this will be an enlightening exercise. They may look different, right? So I'm going to go over what should be included in a financial aid notification to students. But the key piece, and I think where this conversation about decoding and how do I compare my offers comes into play, is because they might look different from one school to another, right? So really helping them understand what is it that I'm looking at, to know how I can compare those 8 offers and what, in terms of from a financial perspective, makes the most sense for me and for my family. So there are some key pieces that should absolutely be included, regardless of how it is presented on the page. There should be some key pieces included. So one is the cost of attendance. Just like Colby explained, that's that overarching number, including direct and indirect costs. So that cost of attendance should be displayed, and it should have a breakdown between direct and indirect. That would be a best practice to really make that distinction very clear on that notification. The other one is really distinguishing then, when it comes to their aid, the types of aid. So loans, scholarships, grants, student employment, you want all of those items listed and their dollar amounts, but you also want to distinguish what is a loan, what has to be repaid, versus a grant or scholarship that does not. So that, again, as the student or the family is making a plan for how they're going to cover anything additional that's not covered by aid, they really have a good grasp and understanding on what does this mean for us? What are we going to have to repay? Do we want to go down that route, or do we want to look at gift aid or student employment only? So really distinguishing which of those categories it fits into is key as well. The other one is the estimated net price. So a best practice would be to look at that cost of attendance and subtract out just the gift aid. And that's what we're going to consider net price. What may vary from school to school is they may include loans when they're subtracting that out, to say, hey, you're not going to have to pay a dime, but they have included loans when they're doing that calculation. So really getting into the nuts and bolts, if they haven't indicated on that page how they arrived at that number, making sure the student asks some follow-up questions to ask, getting a piece of, pen and paper and doing that math, or pulling out your smartphone, having your calculator and doing that math yourself to see, how did they arrive at that figure? Because best practice that we want to present students and families with is, if you don't pay out of pocket, if you don't borrow any money, if it's just the free money, what is that picture for you? And if you do that, then that's where you get into, again, getting at least a little bit closer to that apples to apples comparison. But if you're not looking closely enough, then you may be including some loans or parent plus loans in that figure. And of course, those are two very different scenarios. So that would be certainly a key piece that I would walk through with students and families. In terms of, again, that comparison process and thinking about, if I have multiple financial aid notifications, what are those pieces that I can control? What are those levers that I can pull that may have an impact on what this is going to cost me? Of course, each school, their tuition and fees may look very different, and their scholarships may look different, but that is only one piece of it. There's also your enrollment. So if a student is enrolling part-time and they know that is their plan, that's something to keep in mind and to look at in that financial aid notification. Many, if not most, financial aid notifications will assume full-time enrollment. So certainly keeping that in mind, that's going to change the tuition cost, right? But that's also going to impact aid eligibility in many cases. If you're Pell eligible, that's going to change the Pell amount, and even some scholarships. So that's certainly a piece to consider. housing arrangements. If you're going to live on campus or off campus, what are the costs associated with that? What is the rent in the area? Even if you're not living on campus, rent in Indianapolis is going to look very different than if you're going to school in South Bend. So taking that into account as you're planning what that's going to look like for you through the duration of school, that's one of those questions you'll want to take into account. In addition, if you plan to, live at home with family and you're going to commute, still thinking about how far is that commute, that has value to it, right? I mean, not just gas, but time, energy. Will I commit to actually driving an hour each way? Maybe, maybe not, but that's something that you want to think about on the front end. And parking, is parking readily available, or am I going to drive in circles trying to find a parking space and then I end up late to class? If parking is available, what is the cost? What does a parking permit cost? So taking into account all of that, any additional institutional fees. So depending on how the school charges their tuition, it may be flat tuition, and some miscellaneous fees. Some schools, IU Indianapolis, there are program fees. So if you are in the School of Nursing, you have an additional program fee associated with that because of the labs and the materials required for that program of study, and having that cost, even if it's something you might not have until your junior year. Knowing about that on the front end so you can plan accordingly and keeping that in mind, is super helpful. External scholarships, many times an external scholarship. So if Ethan mentioned these earlier, if you worked with maybe a parent's employer or community foundation and you're getting a scholarship from an external entity, those may not be included on the financial aid notification, right? Because the school doesn't know that you are getting it yet. They haven't gotten the check, they haven't gotten a letter, whatever the case may be. So again, as you're doing your math, keeping that in mind, if you know you have an external scholarship, the student will want to make sure they include that in the math that they're looking at. Another question I would always ask is if they're being offered a scholarship from the institution that they're considering, is that a one-time award or is it renewable? If it is not clearly spelled out for them, most times we, in the aid offices try to make that very clear, but if it's not, that would certainly be a follow-up question. Money is money, and that's great. And I don't have students turn it down very often, but knowing if it's one time and that my financial picture is going to look very different the following 3 years, or I may need to fill out an additional application or whatever that case may be, is important, again, to know on the front end for planning purposes. And then the other piece too is, has the student had a change in family income or unexpected expenses? So if you all will recall, the FAFSA is looking at financial information from 2 years ago. And so if a parent since then has lost a job, or had really exorbitant medical expenses, things of that nature, then students can go to their aid office at the school that they're considering and let them know about those changes. And then we have some processes in place where we can account for some of those drastic changes that may have occurred in those 2 years. So when in doubt, if you ever hear a student or family expressing those concerns, let them know, hey, reach out and see if there are any some considerations that the aid office can make for you. So always happy to help students in that scenario. Sometimes we can't, but if nothing else, hearing their concerns and hearing what they're grappling with at least helps us get them pointed in the right direction and explain what their options may be. So that's always super helpful too. And now I'm just going to show, like I mentioned, the financial aid notifications themselves, the letter that students receive, whether that is paper in the mail or electronically, they may look different depending on where it's coming from. Again, some of those key elements should be there, but the layout looks different. So for our students and for our families that this may be a brand new experience and process to walk through, that in itself can be challenging. They look at two pieces of paper that look totally different, they have it in a different order, or they're calling it different things. That can prove challenging. So really helping them kind of take a deep breath, take a step back, and look at how it's laying it out, and help walk through what each of those elements mean, is super helpful. So you can see here, this is the IU Indianapolis financial aid notification. We have that cost of attendance broken out for students up here at the top. And then we go into their aid down below. And we have the net cost where we're just looking at gift aid. And then we go into loans and work study. And then Ivy Tech, so again, looks a little bit different, but they have many of the same elements. They're assuming full-time enrollment, they give them the cost of attendance, they walk them through grants and scholarships, and then they have the other items down below. So looks different when you first, get your eyes on it, but then you can see many of the same recurring themes and elements are there. This is the college financing plan. So some schools will just use this. This is kind of a form letter, and that also, again, looks even different than the other two that we saw. But again, many of the same elements, just in a different format. And so some students may see that. So just getting them comfortable with taking a beat and kind of looking at what each of those categories are. So with that, I will turn it back over to Colby to talk about, as I mentioned, some very specific considerations for 24-25.
And I will say, we had originally created this presentation in preparation for delivering this to you. I think it was in January that we were originally going to deliver this presentation. And so
we were still so hopeful.
So hopeful. There was a sliver of hope that we would be on track still. Unfortunately, that is not the case. So when I say timeline may differ from prior years, timeline will differ from prior years. And we're hoping that this is a one-year anomaly and that we'll be able to get back onto a more regular track in future years. But yes, there have been delays in FAFSA filing. I think I know the commission is going to touch on FAFSA filing later today in this workshop, but I also want to just mention that normally the FAFSA is available on October 1st, and this year it was not available until December 30th, and I believe that would be what we consider the soft launch. So I think it was open for 30 minutes a day on the 30th and 31st of December. It did ramp up from there, but there were whole populations of students that weren't able to access the form until as late as really March is when we saw some of the larger populations that had issues being able to get those issues resolved. So while the FAFSA is in, I think, a little bit better shape today than it was on December 30th, we got to keep in mind that we have lost ground as far as opportunity for students to file that FAFSA. But the other component is, when do institutions receive that processed FAFSA data? Because as a college financial aid office, we can't start to do any of what you're seeing here today in this presentation, putting together our students' financial aid package and getting to a point where we can send out those financial aid offers to students. We can't even begin to do that until we start receiving those processed FAFSAs from federal student aid. So I remember the date clearly because most of us were at our state conference when this occurred. March 13th is when we started to receive any number of processed FAFSAs from federal student aid. Normally, we would receive that shortly after October 1st as well. So that is we're looking at a 5-month delay in getting that type of information. So the other component to keep in mind is that we also have software systems, for especially large institutions like IU Indianapolis, Ivy Tech. We don't do this all in-house. We do have software vendors that help us manage financial aid processes. And those software vendors typically have considerable lead time to get those processes ready to go and to be able to provide those updates to our system so that we can handle changes and we can start to put financial aid onto students' accounts and to start to send out financial aid offers. those vendors really didn't get all those pieces into place until the end of March. I think some may still be putting out patches and they're doing it piecemeal. I will say from my experience, we use a software system called Banner, and Banner didn't provide the update that we need to even start loading that process FAFSA data until towards the end of March. I think it was March 21st. We were able to just get that installed over the weekend, and now Ivy Tech's going to be able to start pulling in those processed FAFSAs. And now we really are racing as quickly as we can to try to get financial aid packages into place and to start sending out financial aid offers. But I think that might give you a little bit of insight into what some of these delays have created for institutions. And I'm sure Lauren, I don't know, Lauren, are you experiencing a similar scenario with because you have different systems with PeopleSoft?
Yes. So similarly, we've waited on piecemeal patches as they get information from the Department of Ed. So we're hoping here in the coming weeks, we'll be able to get packages rolling. Another piece to that is, of course, our software vendors. So Oracle, PeopleSoft for us, Banner for Colby, and there are others. They're testing, they are making sure their software works, but then we also have to do that once it gets to the school. So we've been able to load in the processed FAFSAs, but then we have to do some practice runs and make sure that we're sending students correct information, because the last thing we want to do is send out a financial aid notification and then say, oh, whoops, our software wasn't working the way we thought it was, and your financial picture looks drastically different. So really doing as much of that testing as we can. But it's a much shorter runway for students and for families this year, for sure.
And I'll just kind of touch on a couple of more points on this. So financial aid offers may include conservative estimates. I think that was initially our thought, especially as the state of Indiana was trying to determine what amount would we bring forward for state financial aid, because there are a lot of changes that are happening outside of some of the anomalies I talked about and the delays. This is one of the largest changes to financial aid at the federal level in over 40 years. And so this is something that it takes a lot of thought to think about what that impact will be to our state financial aid programs. But I think I would just provide a little bit of thanks to our state partners for giving us a little bit more stability on what those amounts are going to look like. And I think at least from our angle at Ivy Tech, we're making assumption that those amounts are going to remain flat for the next year as we're building our aid packages. So that actually has provided a little bit of certainty. But we are expecting revisions to aid packages, I think, as we move forward. We're hoping to minimize those as much as possible. But today we know that there are several issues that have been identified by the federal government, some that have been acknowledged and some I'm not certain have been acknowledged quite yet, where there are data issues, we think, with the FAFSA data that they have provided to us. And those are going to get fixed. The federal government has committed to reprocessing and sending out corrected information to financial aid offices, hopefully later this month. So we're hoping from a timing standpoint that many of those corrections will be made prior to us sending out financial aid offers to students. However, I think I know I'm preparing for a world where we're going to have some corrections that are made after we've sent out financial aid offers to students. And that is something that we're going to try to minimize the impact however we can, but we are very reliant on accurate information from our federal partners, as the state is as well. Okay, I think those are our slides. Are there what questions do you have? I know we've had some really good questions in the chat, so we've been kind of trying to answer those as we go along. What questions can we help answer for you?
I have a quick question. If after the students receive an award letter, let's say in the circumstance you just said where it might be an error and corrected and come back. Let's say that that error is in the students and family. It's not going to work in the favor of the student and family. What is the, like communication with the student and family? What if they get the award letter and, sign up based on that first award letter and then it's higher? What does that process look like for the student and family, and how can they work with the financial aid department?
Well, it's going to depend from institution to institution. I think it's pretty safe to say that financial aid offices will communicate that change. So if we see that a change has happened to a student's financial aid package throughout the year, we generally will send a revised financial aid offer to the student or some other kind of notification, letting them know of that adjustment. In some scenarios, colleges may be looking to see if there's any institutional dollars that might be able to help the student. But I will say, depending on the nature of the issue, and these are some very significant financial aid programs, many institutions aren't going to be able to cover for a mistake that maybe came about because of the federal government's data. So we would do the best that we can to communicate what happened, what that impact means for the student, and try to find alternatives that we might be able to point the student to. I mean, I know Ethan mentioned earlier scholarships, right? Oftentimes that does go underutilized, and we may be able to close some of that gap if we can work with a student. We'll do a lot of case-by-case individual support like that, but we just hope that we don't have as many of those as when we start sending out offers. We hope that's minimized.
All right.
Any other questions? So we have a question in the chat about when will students be able to make corrections on the FAFSA? Well, that is a very good question. Laura, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe federal student aid had said the first couple of weeks of April that FAFSA corrections would be possible in the system. But I am looking at the calendar and it does say April 9th, and that is still not a reality today. So
they have about a week. About a week if they meet their own deadline, yes.
So federal student aid, I'll give you these resources in my next section as well too, but just to answer the question for that, the timeline for corrections, federal student aid in their fast news today said that end of day, they would have more information for us. So we'll see what that means and what information they will be sharing. But I have links to a lot of great resources for y'all as well too. So if you want to keep up with everything that's happening at the federal level, issues, alerts, updates, fast news, we have links for all of that we're all looking at daily as well too on the college financial aid side and the state financial aid side, trying to keep up and help answer those questions for you. Awesome. Anything else while we have Colby and Lauren here? Amazing. Awesome. Colby, Lauren, thank you so much.
We'll drop our contact info in the chat as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Amazing. That was super helpful information. I think from even like the state side, just knowing and like being able to walk through these processes, revisiting terminology, revisiting the way that all of these cost of attendance loans, all this is laid out and how it looks so different. I think that's like the big takeaway too, right? Is not every financial aid notification is going to look the exact same. And to be able to make sure that students understand that terminology and parents understand that terminology to know exactly what they're looking at, and what line is where and what line means what. And we know it's quite a puzzle sometimes as well too. So I'm glad you guys got great resources here, but also examples that were provided to be able to kind of see the different types of layouts that can happen from institution to institution. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen with y'all. I will do my best to keep up with questions. I know looks like Michaela is also in the chat. I also have Madison here from the commission as well too. They'll be on the lookout for any chats that they can help answer, but I will make sure that after I'm done with like my presentation timeframe, I'll unshare my screen and be able to look back at the chats together as well. Just wanted to let y'all know, but wanted to use the time as much as possible to give you as many updates that we have. Let me go ahead and pull this up. All right. So as far as our FAFSA updates that we have from the commission, so a couple housekeeping things just at the very front. So we wanted to remind everybody of Senate Enrolled Act 167. This affects the class of 2024. So if you are not aware, hopefully all of you are aware that Senate Enrolled Act 167 was passed by the General Assembly in the 2023 legislative session that makes the FAFSA a required element for high school seniors. But again, we wanted to make sure that people know that within that, there are broad opt-out provisions. Now, of course, we want to ensure that as many students as possible are filing that FAFSA. Well, as we all know, FAFSA is not just for a 4-year or 2-year degree program, but for so many different options. So even if you do have students who are not on the 2-year or 4-year degree pathway when it comes to post-secondary, even if college is not first on their list, it may move up to first on their list over the summer, or something may happen that prevents a plan that's already in place from actually happening, and they have to revisit that college space potentially as well too. And so having a FAFSA on file just kind of completes that wraparound of protection for them, of like having a plan, right, before they graduate high school and as we approach the April 15th priority state deadline. So those broad opt-out provisions are included. Information's on our website, on the CHE website. I'm certainly happy to provide any links or anything to everybody to find that information as well. But there is a FAFSA waiver that families and emancipated students who are over the age of 18 can file, and they can waive that, saying, I recognize and know what the FAFSA is, and I will not be filing it. Or after April 15th, there is a mass waive process as well too. And I'll talk a little bit about how that gets uploaded and what those processes will look like as well, and timing on that at the end of this presentation. But again, part of this Enrolled Act is that communication is kind of at the core of this, right? So in order for students to opt out and for students to be waived in that mass sense, we want to make sure that the school follows the what's codified, which means it's the 2 communications about filing the FAFSA that have been sent to parents and guardians. So as long as your school, and that is defined pretty broadly, so whatever that means for your school as far as that communication to families and students, at least 2 of those communications should be documented, and you should probably keep those on file just in case. We will not ask for that information, but in order to abide by code, you want to make sure that you have those 2 communications documented about filing the FAFSA that have been sent to parents and guardians about their students for this year, especially. So as far as just updates, we wanted to take some moments. We know that there's been like a lot of rocky things that have been happening this year, but we do want to celebrate something within the state of Indiana. And we know that there's so much more to go and so many more milestones that we need to hit in order to get to those goals that we have set in that Commissioner Lowry has in his HOPE agenda as well. But Indiana is a top 5 state right now in closing the gap for FAFSA filings across the United States. We are looking at a lot of information. We're not only looking at the FSA data that is available to us on FAFSA submissions, that's at that school level and state level, but we're also looking at the NCAN FAFSA tracker, which a lot of that information gets pulled to. And so this is a screenshot directly from that. I have a link to that FAFSA tracker in here. So if you all are curious and want to look at that information, you'll have a link to that. But right now we're currently ranked 2nd in the country with that percentage change. I'll show you kind of what that negative percentage change means, but negative 16.5 change of closing that gap from year to year, which is really exciting. So out of the 50 states, we're ranked 2nd. So we know that even with the late rollout, even with the rockiness of what's happening, even though we know that some people are deterred because at that very beginning of that FAFSA filing, they hit some of those barriers that prevented them from moving forward potentially. So we know that there are issues, but that's happening across the United States as well too, unfortunately. It's not only Indiana that's seeing that, but we're really thankful for all of your work, all of our community organizations that are on this call, outreach coordinators. I know 2 of our outreach coordinators are on this call for Marion County as well. All of our colleges, financial aid offices and admissions offices, everybody just getting the word out and ensuring that people know Senate Enrolled Act 167, but also just the importance of filing a FAFSA, and that us moving the needle on that college going rate and that persistence rate, that FAFSA is a huge piece of that as well too. So I wanted to take a moment to celebrate a small little victory that we're seeing throughout all of this, and we hope to continue to see that gap continuing to close as time goes on. But this is as of the March 29th information. So as you can see, another snapshot from that NCAN FAFSA tracker profile for the state of Indiana. This information is through March 29th. As you all may know, and as we all know, a lot of movement happens in the first 2 weeks of April for us because of that April 15th deadline. So we're still very optimistic about the way that we are moving and the direction that we are moving. And I'm a very visual person, obviously. I think a lot of people are. So being able to see this kind of curve and our trajectory for this as well too is super helpful. So you can see that closing the gap, that year-over-year submission change that I talked about. You can see that on that first graph there as well. So that year-over-year change in FAFSA submissions, really excited to see something like that that's happening. And you can see on the right side the estimated percentage of seniors submitting a FAFSA. So while we're kind of lagging behind there, we're still on that trajectory. We're still on that curve, which is still something to be excited about. But we also still have a ways to go, and we still are kind of chasing that goal that we have. And kind of where we're at nationally as well too. But as you can see up there, about 30,000 submissions in Indiana as of March 29th. We know that has grown, of course, as we've gotten through this first week of April and going into this last week before that priority deadline for us as well, specifically for the class of 2024. For Marion County specifically, so as we're looking at this county, helpful for all of the schools that are kind of in this convening today that are in Indianapolis. These are our submissions to date for the class of 2024 and class of 2023, and that percentage change overall as well. And going to that link that I'll share with you all, this FAFSA tracker, or if you type in like NCAN FAFSA tracker into your browser right now, you can go in there and play around. Not only can you look at county information, state information, but you all can pull up your school information as well. The only information that we do not have our hands on or can't give to you all quite yet that we're trying to ingest from the federal government is that student level data that we know you all are hungry for. We are hungry for it as well too, to be able to truly get a sense of who has and who has not filed that FAFSA. But at least this can give you an idea of school-wise where you're at point in time for the class of 2024 in comparison to that class of 2023 as well. So some things that we are hearing, right? Colby and Lauren talked a little bit about this. I know Ethan kind of mentioned a little bit about this, but we know this has been a rocky road for some of our populations, for students. On one hand, we're hearing from some students and families, this has been the fastest FAFSA, like especially students who have not hit any of those barriers that students are filing in 10 or 15 minutes, which overall, when we think about the FAFSA submission process and the simplification process, we're still optimistic about the future of the FAFSA and where we see this going and how much easier, hopefully, this will continue to be over time. But we know that this year in particular, there have been struggles. And the two biggest things that we're hearing, these are not the only things that we are hearing, but two of the biggest things that we are hearing is my FAFSA is processed, but we can't make corrections. So the making up corrections piece is a huge deal, right? As Colby mentioned it, and Lauren mentioned it, the corrections piece and going back in and making sure that they're updating necessary information for the federal government, for us, and for colleges as well too. And I quoted Rich from that FAFSA Fast News this morning as I was looking up things and getting ready for the day, was reading things and had to input this in, but they'll provide updated information to those colleges and state agencies about what they can expect for students' corrections and reprocessing of records that were happening as well too. So crossing our fingers, knocking on all the wood, all the things that we hear, some good information about a timeline, hopefully from FSA, to be able to get an idea of when students can go back and do those corrections in. We know that we're doing a big push right now of get your FAFSA in. We're pulling in community organizations. We're trying to tell all of our friends, all of our family members, like, get your FAFSA in. But we also know that there will be another big push of getting those corrections done and those edits made as well too. So more to come on those communications that we're going to be having as well too. But just know from your perspectives of being in the high schools, yes, FAFSAs are going to be processed. Some FAFSAs are going to have to be reprocessed, But as FAFSAs are being processed, you probably already have heard from families and students that it's asking me to make corrections, but I can't go in and make those corrections yet. What can I do? And the answer right now is sit tight, unfortunately. And hopefully FSA will provide more information to us to be able to let students and families know, go in, make those corrections, and complete those next steps as well. We also know that another one of those issues is parents without Social Security numbers creating an FSA ID or anything else potentially within the FAFSA form itself. So if you're not aware, there's a FAFSA issue alerts page on the FSA website. Super helpful, not only like handbook, Q&As, all of that, but wanted to provide this as there are open issues and resolved issues on that webpage. So if students had been experiencing an issue, but now there is a workaround or there's a solution or it's been resolved, that can be found on a lot of that page as well. I also put in this link from the March 5th update. We've been getting a lot of questions about just parent Social Security numbers. There has been guidance for a lot of that as well. So gave that link to you all to be able to utilize as well too. Scholar track things, right? So a lot of questions that we get are also the when are we going to know? How am I going to know who my students are who have not submitted the FAFSA, right? So student level data, when it comes to FAFSA data, means that we have to receive that ISER, the Institutional Student Information Record. That's what Colby was kind of before when he mentioned that information has to come from FSA to us for us to be able to create financial aid packages or for us to be able to review students and be able to award state aid based on that information as well. So as Colby mentioned, with Banner, PeopleSoft, we have to take that new ISER, which because of FAFSA simplification, that ISER data has changed and it does not match what the ingestion was happening previously. So we have to take those new ISERs. We have to build kind of a bridge, right, between that ISER and translating that information into all of our programs for Scholar Track as well. So that's happening right now. We will be uploading ISERs once we receive more ISERs from the federal government, once processing continues to happen, once processing gets up to an up-to-date timeline and time frame as well. But that ISER data has to come to us and we have to ingest that properly and correctly into Scholar Track. And that information will populate in the Excel Senior FAFSA completion report. All of you, I believe, have your data share agreements on file. If you do not see when you go into Scholar Track that completion report, then that information can be found with me and we can make sure you get access to it, of course. If you don't have access to Scholar Track and you need that and your school says you're responsible for FAFSA things, we can get you access to that as well too. So Scholar Track is also where that FAFSA waiver and mass waivering reporting is going to happen as well. So every single year, we do graduation details collection from all the schools, specifically for 21st century scholars, as well as students who have honors diplomas that may receive incentives, Franco-Bannon incentives that are monetary incentives. So we collect all the information, but this year we're also going to integrate in the FAFSA mass waiving and waivers reporting into that. We're building that out alongside building the matching process for the ISERs and to be able to translate information into Scholar Track. So those are getting built out side by side to make sure that all of that information comes correct and that it's ready for you all. Once we pass that April 15th deadline, we will communicate out through outreach coordinators, through us, through central office on our listservs, to all necessary high school partners, what that process looks like and what we're going to be expecting and when that's all going to come in. More than likely, all of that is going to be due June 15th. So we have some time. It's not information that has to get in immediately, those FAFSA waivers and mass waiving, but we will want to collect that information by that June 15th deadline that we're going to be setting. So this is kind of a preview to all of you. June 15th is going to be a very big day for the commission and reporting for 21st century scholars, for those honors students, and for FAFSA waivers and mass waiving processes. Michelle Ashcroft is also going to be doing some webinars, step-by-step processes on how to do that, and we will provide information and support through our outreach coordinators to help you all get all the information that you need to out of your hands and into Scholar Track to report with us. If you are not aware of how to access this FAFSA completion report, I know that was a couple questions that I received previously before this convening. Wanted to add it in here for all of you, right? As far as accessing it, once you log into ScholarTrack, this is what ScholarTrack looks like for you. This main page where it has the student search, all of that. You'll go down on the left side navigation to reports and click on that middle school and high school report. Once you click, you'll go to the reports tab. You'll go all the way down at the bottom. It should say Excel Senior FAFSA Completion Report. You'll click that. It'll take you to this page here. You will add in the cohort, which this year will be 2024. And then you don't have to add any other information in. You can click that download button. And then you are going to get an Excel sheet that's going to look like this. It's going to have the cohort, their scholar ID. We're trying to get STNs on here as well too. I know that has been something that has been requested. Lots of things have to go through ScholarTrack and get updated. So we're trying to put those in order according to importance and time frame and deadlines as well. It'll have first name, last name, date of birth, high school, county, region, phone number, email, parent email, things that are coming from the FAFSA. And then that lovely M column is our favorite column, is the FAFSA status. It's either going to say yes, no, or wrong year filed. It's probably helpful right now to continue to look at those wrong year filed and kind of track that and see if students are accidentally doing that 23-24 FAFSA instead of doing the 24-25 FAFSA. We know that can be confusing for students. They think this is the year of 23-24 and not realizing that the FAFSA is being used for the next academic year and they should be filing that 24-25 FAFSA. So continue to check on those students, potentially may be helpful. But once that information populates, you will then start seeing the yeses and the nos populate as well too. Right now, you're probably getting unavailable or wrong year filed pretty much right now. So once that is ready to go, once you are downloading those, that information will populate. Now, as far as once ICER ingestion starts to happen continuously for us, when that is all updated, when the student files a FAFSA and the time frame it takes to get into ScholarTrack may be 3 to 5 days. So it's not an immediate thing where if a student files a FAFSA and you go in and you look at ScholarTrack and it still says no for FAFSA filing, that's why. We have a data share agreement. All of the colleges have data share agreements with the federal government. It's not a linked thing where if it immediately happens there, it connects to us. It's just not the way it happens. They have to physically send that information to us securely as well and make sure that we get that ingested correctly, and then it'll populate into these reports. So resources. So if you haven't seen this, I sent this to all of our outreach coordinators. So hopefully your outreach coordinator sent this to you or you saw it on our platforms and social media. Bill Wozniak from InvestEd and I are doing a FAFSA live stream tonight. That is on our Learn More platform. And I believe Bill will be sharing that on the InvestEd platform as well. So Facebook Live at 6 p.m. tonight. So Bill and I will be talking about corrections and the questions that we're hearing and why it's important to file a FAFSA. So if that is something that you are interested in sharing with your students or even attending to hear what we're saying to students and families as well too, you are more than welcome to join us. We're so happy to have you, and we'll be doing our best to share as much information and encouraging families and students to file their FAFSA as possible. I have Bukola and Bernice as well too on this phone call, your outreach coordinators for us. They are more than happy to help you. The list of your schools is on our website, on our contact page. So if you're unsure who you belong to, you can go onto our website and do that. But usually I think Bukola has introduced herself to everybody at this point as well, who she will be helping with. Pretty much the split is, I think Bernice is township schools, as well as like the IPS, like core 4 high schools. And then Bukola is doing IPS network schools, parochial schools, charter schools, pretty much everything else that does not fall under like a district school or those core 4 IPS schools as well too. So you're more than welcome with anything to reach out to them, last minute filing things, questions that families have. Bernice is also bilingual. So if you need support for your families who are bilingual, we also have our ILI, the Indiana Latino Institute colleagues on the call today. They are certainly more than happy to help with translation and supporting students who need that as well. So please don't hesitate to let us know how we can help those families. And then those resources. These are the links to the FAFSA Fast News that comes out daily from FSA now. That started at the beginning of April. So we're only 9 days in, so not very much to catch up on for you all. The issue alerts page, so any issues that are continuously happening on the FAFSA that are being resolved or that there are workarounds for that your students may be experiencing. You may want to check out that to help your students or direct them to that page as well. There's a FAFSA updates page, which is general simplification FAFSA updates. This was really helpful for us at the very beginning when we were trying to find that information. General FAQs, and then my favorite that I feel like is very underutilized is the 24-25 Federal Student Aid Handbook, which is the handbook that kind of talks through the financial, like the FAFSA form and application as well too, and helps define words and lingo that FSA is using too. A very important partner to us, not only all of our colleges that are on this call and beyond this call, but InvestEd is an incredible resource. They've been wonderful to work with. They have been so supportive of everything that's been going on, and they are incredibly knowledgeable of all things FAFSA and federal financial aid. So your students should absolutely, and parents should absolutely utilize them this week leading up, in addition to all of our outreach coordinators as well. But Bill will be joining me again tonight on the live stream, but also something to think about for all of you as you're thinking for next year's FAFSA. Please communicate early with Bill and PJ's team. So InvestEd needs to know what their year is going to look like pretty much around this time. I would say start reaching out if you have some ideas or weeks that you know you want them in. It may behoove you to reach out early to get on their calendar and secure the days or timeframes that you're looking for, because once they book up for a day, they book up for a day. So I'm going to continue to reiterate what they have said to all of us is please reach out early if you want to schedule some professional, incredibly high touch help from InvestEd to help your families and students. And of course, along with InvestEd, we are more than happy to come and support on the state aid side, also on the federal side, but we also come with that 21st century scholar notion. So we can come to InvestEd events alongside them, or if you kind of want a combo event and InvestEd's like, hey, we booked up that date, our outreach coordinators can help with that as well. That was a lot of information. I'm now going to exit this and pull up everybody again. I know we probably have some questions in the chat. I know I probably ran through a lot of information as well. Oh, Maria, yes, thank you. The first thing I see is ILI also has that Facebook Live event tomorrow for the Spanish FAFSA updates. Ivan Perez Paulino, who is our outreach coordinator from Northwest Indiana, she will be on that call providing state information as well too. So any of your families, please, I encourage them to attend that live event tomorrow to answer their questions, but they also will post the video and they can watch that at a later time as well too. And they've had a couple of these, so it may be helpful to share that information as well too. Let's see. Awesome. Okay, so tomorrow, what if you don't see the FAFSA completion report on your reports tab? Email me. Email me or your outreach coordinator. Let's make sure you have a data share agreement on file, and then we'll make sure that we can like add that in, and you'll have access to that when we start populating those ICERs. Ooh, it's not. I think I answered all of the questions in the chat, maybe. Please, someone let me know if I haven't. I know that was a ton of information, and I know that you are anxiously waiting for information just as we are, just as the colleges are. We hope that we have been as helpful as possible this year through our outreach coordinators, through InvestEd, through this convening and these opportunities to connect together as well too, to provide as much information to support you as you are supporting your students and families who are at a loss, right? They don't know where to start. They're the ones trying to figure this out as well too. And we're the ones who have been lucky enough to kind of maybe be around the block or two and kind of know what we're talking about. But maybe this year, like, you know, even we all have some questions about what's happening as well too. So we're right there in that boat with you. But we really appreciate all of your support, all of the unwavering support in the work that you do to serve your students, and the work that you do with us, and being so great about connecting with us, your outreach coordinators, providing us information, feedback as well too, on how we can continue to build things that are going to be best for you and your students. I'm always open for that kind of feedback as well too. I used to be boots on the ground. Now I'm in central office in an office trying to help people as well too. You all are boots on the ground as well too. So through outreach coordinators and through all of you really helps us identify the ways that we can continue to serve you in the best capacity that we can as well. Questions, concerns, needs, things that we haven't delivered to you that at this time you need at the moment. Beautiful. Amazing. Okay, great. Well, I will stick around for a little while. So anyone wants to like hang around for a few minutes and ask questions or get information, you are more than welcome to stick around. I'll stay on for a few more minutes, but thank you all for joining us. Good luck through this week, through the rest of the year, but please don't hesitate to reach out to us, your outreach coordinators, Invest Ed, colleges, financial aid offices. We're here to help and support you. And thank you all for the work that you do and for being on this call and joining us today. Beautiful. Awesome. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
I didn't mean to leave.
Oh, no worries. Hi.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to leave. So this
No
is what I
worries.
wanted to ask you. So I went on the National College Attainment Network website, and I pulled up Pike High School.